we
Okay,
recommend.
Gary, so now we've made formally a diagnosis. We're there. You've talked a lot about behaviorism isn't really the theory that we're going to camp in.
Right.
Talk to us then about this more social, emotional, developmental model. And we've done a lot of work together, and I know you're an expert in attachment theory. Just give us some windows into that, and then we'll talk about intervention.
Well, the attachment system is a really important piece for understanding this problem. We don't want to call it an attachment disorder. You can be really good parents who's there for your kids. You love them. You're involved with them. You're not a parent who has any major addiction problems, and you may have some mood, and some of it may just be related to your kid. You're stressed out and you don't know what's going on.
Sure.
But just understanding attachment in very simplistic terms is in light of the secure-based system. The secure-based system is this: your child's ability to get regulated, to get calmed down, and to have an internal sense of security begins and is rooted in the parent-child relationship. It's a dyadic process. It begins there very early on in life. When your child feels secure, even on a day-to-day basis, what they do is they tend to explore around them. Right? So exploration, the ability to sort of feel interested in things around you and to play independently and to sort of, put a young child in a room, they'll go out and, pull the books off your shelves and they're just having a good old time. That's based on their sense of security, that you're available to them should they need you.
So are they safe, and are you accessible, available, willing to respond to them?
Right. Now, what happens is at any time, by the way, we always point out that exploration in young children is the beginning of self-esteem and self-reliance in later childhood and then into adulthood. I always point out to parents that your sense of security is only as strong as your sense that your attachment figures are available and reliably accessible to you. If you got a phone call right now, I point out to them that that your husband or that your parents were in grave danger, you'd no longer be interested in being here or listening to this. That would shut off. So
what I'm doing is there are core relational beliefs about myself and others that are being affected here.
Exactly. So kids move away, exploration. Anything that gets them upset internally, in the environment, or any threat to your relationship creates anxiety.
So my mood is directly impacted by my sense of safety.
Absolutely. And my sense that you're available to me.
Right.
Now, whenever kids get upset, for whatever reason, their exploration system turns off and the attachment system turns on. When the attachment system turns on, kids are signaling to parents that there's a problem. In infants, of course, they cry and they run toward you. But any behavior can be an attachment behavior. Some of them are actually somewhat dysfunctional if you look at them themselves, like crying, whining, temper tantrums. And if you ever see kids who are really separated from parents and they're ticked off about it, they look like they're having a panic attack. All those behaviors are a sign of attachment behavior. It's children trying to get back to the caregiver, and they're saying, help me get calmed down. That's where the safe haven experience comes in, because parents respond to that. They help their kid get calmed down, re-regulate it, right? The secure base kicks in, and they'll get back out to exploration.
Right.
Now, a couple problems happen here. First of all, these kids, because of some of the deficits we've talked about, have great difficulty getting calmed down and feeling secure. Even when you're being a secure base as a parent, these kids actually need more of it, not less of it, because they don't feel secure. As a result, that's where these kids are often hovering around you. They won't go play in their rooms. They won't play with toys. They're sort of always in your face, wanting your attention. That's actually because they have...
And it's wearing, Gary. It's very wearing. And it's very challenging, even as a therapist, too, because if you don't do well with anger and that complex, highly intense emotional environment, your natural drive is to move away from it.
Absolutely. Right.
Either that or beat it into subjection. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, and see, both of them tend to overwhelm the attachment system, right? Because it increases the child's sense that I can't rely on you and you're not reliable and not accessible. And then the other piece is that these kids, because they get so upset so quickly, their signaling behavior that there's a problem is way over the top, right? I mean, they have huge temper tantrums. They have meltdowns. They get grumpy and irritable and grouchy, and that's actually attachment behavior. One of the difficulties is that parents tend to read that attachment behavior as either spoiled or manipulative or controlling. And how you label it, of course, as a parent is going to affect how you respond to it. If you're a behaviorist, you want to terminate that behavior through punishments often.
It's a hard thing to distinguish here, Gary.
Absolutely.
I think many would come back and say then, Gary, how do you assess whether or not this is related to their calming problem and their core cognitive skill deficits versus learning the power of anger and how you can control other people through it?
Well, I think those
because it's been so reinforced to use some behavioral language.
Right. And here's a question. Has the stuff that you've used worked? Does timeout? Does taking things away?
And obviously in a complex ODD thing, it hasn't.
Exactly. So I don't tell parents this on the front end. Sometimes, especially if their child's already developed these skills and they're using anger to control people and manipulate and these sorts of things, then behavioral interventions work quite well because it's a motivational problem and you can terminate that really quickly using behavioral interventions. With this, and you see the gas go on the fire, you see that timeout means they won't even stay in the room, then you got to lock the room, right? You can start getting really, really over-the-top kind of interventions designed to turn off this behavior, and it really intensifies it. And, this comes from experience. I mean, you and I have used a lot of behavioral interventions, and I'm not against them across the board, but I have seen them fail and fail miserably and sometimes feel really badly that I didn't have this perspective back then, and I feel badly about that. I mean, part of it was that there wasn't anything to tell us that it was anything otherwise, and we were acting on the state of the art at that point in time.
So, Gary, the quality of your relationship, whether it's parent, pastor, youth leader, counselor, determines the effectiveness then of your discipline or intervention strategy.
Exactly. Our intervention strategy, what we want to move parents toward is that we want to affect these core skill deficits. And the approach that we use, which we won't be able to unpack completely here, but I'll outline it for you, parents are often afraid, well, I'm going to lose power. And what they find out is they lose none. Right? They lose none.
Wow.
But they also learn that their goals. See, sometimes parents struggle themselves with some of the cognitive flexibility. You realize, just as a coach, every kid's different, and what you have for goals for one kid are different than the goals that you have for another kid.
Sure.
For some kids, you just simply want them to stay in the box, right, the batter's box when they're being pitched to. Other kids, you might be working on something like hitting a curveball, right, which is a whole other thing. That comes after you learn how to stay in the box. So sometimes as parents, we think that all goals are the same. They're not. You can only work on certain goals at a time. For example, if your goal is absolute total compliance, whenever you say do this, then you're going to have a hard time with this, right? Your child has to learn some other skills before they can learn that kind of compliance. Compliance is a behavioral outcome that rests on top of these skills being in play. See, when these skills are in play, you can do things like say to a teenager who's watching their favorite show, hey, I need you to take the trash out. They'll go, I'm watching my favorite show. You can say, I said take the trash out. Or if you don't, you're going to lose this, this, and this. Right. They may roll their eyes, suck their teeth, and take the trash out. And you might think, that's being a good parent. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly fine parenting. But you try that with one of these kids, right? You're going to get World War III. Same parent, same technique, different kid. Because that kid, that teenager who was able to get up and move, had mood regulation, obviously frustration tolerance, cognitive flexibility, right? All those things are in play. If you don't have those things in play, compliance does not come easy.
Yeah.
So compliance is a developmental outcome. And as we said at the early part of this, many counselors are at a significant deficit in intervening with kids because they don't understand how some of the behaviors that they're trying to get are really developmental outcomes, and they don't understand the underlying processes that kids need to go through to get there. And there's things that can happen. There's individual differences that kids come into the world with that affect their ability to get there. Just like reading is a behavioral outcome, but it rides on top of a number of cognitive processes that are going on. Some kids get it naturally and easily, and it's almost like you don't have to do anything for them to get there as parents. But other children have to have very specific types of interventions to get the brain to do what naturally happens for other kids' brains. Same thing for sports and various other arenas. You can actually make an average kid a really good baseball player if you understand that principle. If you just assume that kids are either good or they're bad as baseball players, or if you think kids who are good are just motivated, then you're not going to be a very good coach. Good coaches realize all kids are different, all kids have different motivations, and I have to adjust my skills and my coaching to address each kid where they're at.
Gary, it seems like a very complex discussion, but it really distills down into some pretty simple thoughts. Now, in terms of intervention, because, Gary, we're fighting time here, what are the 2 or 3 primary intervention strategies? I think you've kind of taken us there, understanding the power of relationship here,
right,
that starts moving this train in the right direction. Because it's like pulling a mammoth train that's a mile long with a caboose here, trying to get all this stuff going in a new direction.
Well, one of the first interventions that we do, and it's really important, is that we explain to parents what's going on, right? We explain very much like what we've talked about here with parents, is that we need a new definition of the problem.
So you've got to do a lot of educating.
You got to do a lot of psychoeducation with parents on the front
I'm
end.
sure it's difficult for parents to receive or accept that because it's
right. But now, if you got complex ODD, they're in a better position. See, I'm in a better position because I can always say, well, I can understand where you're coming from, but has that worked?
Yeah.
Well, no, it hasn't. So that often parents are in a position where they feel like I've got to look at this differently. I've got just numerous cases that have worked out this way where parents have gone through so many different interventions. And those aren't bad interventions. They're just not the right intervention for this type of problem.
Okay.
So one of them is when we explain to parents the core cognitive skill deficits that are in here, they always shake their head up and down.
Lights go on.
Lights go on. Oh, my gosh, that is my child.
That's it.
But you notice that we've moved beyond just behavioral descriptions to underlying processes that are affected. See, now we can do something with that. We can't just do something with behavior except reinforce it or punish it. But we want to create experiences that help the brain grow. Right? God created the brain as a very complex system, but it happens to be that all systems grow the same way. So the same principles that are involved in developing physical skills are also involved in developing cognitive skills.
Now, parents would probably immediately say, but what are we going to do in the now here because he's escalating so much, and we're afraid Johnny's going to wind up in jail. I remember one case I was working with, Gary, where the dad was so fired up. He was with 2 boys, his twin boys. They got in a fist fight in the front yard.
Yeah.
Calling cops, going crazy.
Well, the nice thing about this model is that you almost get 50% of reduction in those type of symptoms, and especially in explosive behavior, very quickly.
You see, I think it's probably hard for parents to receive that, to believe it.
Yeah, and we walk through with them. For example, one of the things that we do is we talk about what we want to begin to help the brain grow by looking at what we call compliance interactions. In other words, I say do this, they say no. Or they say, I want you to do this, and you say no. That's a compliance interaction.
Okay.
Now, what we point out to parents is, in those compliance interactions, there are 5 goals that we want you to focus on. All right? And these goals are directly related to the stuff that we've talked about with the brain development. The first goal is that we want to take the child's concerns seriously. Right? That's actually empathy.
Got it.
Second goal is we want to take the parent concern seriously. Right? Third goal is that we want to reduce meltdowns. In fact, we want to eliminate meltdowns.
Yeah, everybody hates them.
Now, the reason meltdowns are important to eliminate is for a couple of reasons. One is when kids have meltdowns, right, and they lose it, that's when they tend to generate some of the most negative thoughts about themselves and you. I hate you. I hate me. I want to die. I wish I could kill you. Kids think these when they get really angry. And what's important to realize is that these beliefs and these thoughts become ingrained in the brain. They don't go away. They'll come back up throughout the rest of their lives when they get frustrated. Doesn't mean they'll act on them, but they become locked in play. Third is the more the brain does this, the more disintegrated it becomes. Remember, we talked about neurons that fire together, wire together. Well, when you blow the limbic system up, right, and it shuts down all those connections, the research shows that literally there's stress hormones released in the body that actually break down those dendritic connections in the brain that we want. So arguably, you're doing brain damage.
Gotcha.
Meltdowns are not good on a number of levels. So we want to eliminate them. That's our priority on the front end. Fourth is that we want children to work on cognitive skills. And compliance interactions is where they can happen. Last, we want to be a secure base. We want our kids to recognize that we can help them when they get upset and when there's problems, and we can work with them to find solutions. By the way, this has spiritual connections because later in life, this is exactly the model we want children to have of God. Not just that, not just, but we want kids to be able to worship God and engage in that type of relationship, but we also want them to use God as a secure base. And that seems to be at the heart of the gospel at one level.
What a great application too, Gary, this would not just be rote spiritual disciplines. This is about an experiential relationship with God where you actually believe that God is there for you as a parent.
Right.
And you believe the same thing as a therapist or as a youth leader. You're not just doing spiritual exercise. You're demonstrating the fidelity of God in your own life.
Yeah, and as we know, the attachment models get generalized from parent-child relationship to a romantic relationship, so later in life how you handle close relationships, to God. In fact, one of the research projects that we're doing now, the God Attachment Project, is looking just at that continuity from childhood to adolescence to college and on in life. So those are the 5 goals that we have in mind. The question is, and we want to bring the cookies down to the bottom shelf here.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
Is these very specific interactions, when you have a compliance interaction with your child. So if I always use an example, but my son gets up and, let's say that he has complex ODD and he's coming down the stairs and I told him the night before, take out the trash. Well, I come downstairs and the trash isn't outside. I mean, it's still sitting there. And I try to put a coffee ground bag on top of it. It falls off onto the floor, and now I got coffee grounds on the floor. So I'm not a happy camper. And he comes down the stairs, and I say, oh, by the way, it's raining, and it's wet, cold kind of. And I say, get this trash outside right now. Right? If I don't have a complex ODD kid, I'm going to get eye-rolling, probably some back talk, but he's going to carry it out. If I have a complex ODD kid, what's going to happen? Well, depends. Now, I got 3 options. It's important for parents to see that you've got 3 options here. 3 pathways, we call them. Pathway A is the typical pathway where you're going to force your concern. You're taking this trash out.
Sure.
All right. And I ask parents, that means that you're going to use the same things that you've been using. Where's that going to lead? Explosion. Okay. Which of the goals do we meet with pathway A? Well, do we take the child concern seriously? Well, no, probably not. Parent concern? Yep, we're getting that one. Are we increasing the chances of a meltdown? Absolutely. Which is really a problem. Are we working on cognitive skills? No. Right. Especially if he says, I don't want to take it out. It's wet. It's cold. And I got to eat my breakfast. And I got to do my things to get ready. Right. At that point in time.
That's not a hill to die on.
Right. So then your other option, potentially, is pathway C. There's lots of different ways of doing pathway C. Right. But pathway C is, and I underline this, temporarily dropping the concern. The key word is temporarily. In other words, this ain't the time for this to happen. Does that make sense?
Sure.
But why is because the opportunity is not in play, and I am going to get a meltdown. So temporarily dropping it, though, can have lots of forms. Some of them are really not so great at all, and some of them are better. The worst, of course, would be for me to say, take out the trash, right? And he says, no, I'm not going to do it. And you say, oh, fine, I'll do it myself, right? I mean, that's the worst way of doing it. But even in the worst way of doing it, you go back to our goals. Am I taking child concern seriously? Yeah. Mine? No. Am I reducing meltdown? Yeah, I am. Remember, this isn't for life. It's temporary. And that's the worst form of this. Am I working on cognitive skills? No. Secure base? Not really. But I get 2 goals, not just one, and I'm reducing a meltdown, which is terribly important here for a complex ODD kid. All right. We tell parents, though, C is almost always a better option than A with these kids. Now, you'll get jammed up on that as a parent if you think C is a permanent option.
Sure.
It's only a temporary one. B is the option that we want you to go in. Right. Now, B includes a number of skills that are directly targeting this brain. I'll tell you what they are real quickly. There's 5 of them, right? We call this EARIC, EARIC.
Okay.
E is empathy. It simply means, all right, why don't you want to take it? Right? Well, because it's cold, it's wet, and I don't feel like doing it right now. I want to do all the stuff I want to do. All right? All E would be is simply saying, I gotcha.
I'm with you.
I can see that. All right. A is asserting, stands for assertion. You're going to assert what your concerns are. Right. Now, parents have a hard time with this one because they think their concern is their solution. It's not the same thing. The concern is when I ask you to do something and you don't do it, I get really frustrated. Right. And a bigger concern is that you're a part of this family, right? And everybody's got jobs and their jobs are important and this is one of yours. Right. That's my concern. Right. R stands for respect. Now, this is another one that we get jammed up on, but I'll hit it very briefly. Respect means, and we advocate for non-contingent respect, meaning no matter what, you're respectful to your child. And we think that Scripture advocates non-contingent respect. In other words, Jesus is saying that we're not just nice to people who are nice to us. In fact, he implies that even the swine can do that. We're trying to model for our kids non-contingent respect, which is even when people aren't nice to you, you're nice to them, right? And now the bad thing is that kids don't really listen to what we say. They listen to what we do. If we model contingent respect, which means, okay, now that you're not nice to me, I'm going to let you have it, they tend to recapitulate that and redo it. It's just a fact of life. You can't have it both ways. You can't require non-contingent respect from your kids, but
if you're not giving it to them.
Exactly. So we tell parents you have to give up using disrespect, right?
Which is so prominent in these kind of situations.
In fact, parents think that disrespect is a form of punishment, right? That I'm disciplining my child when I'm disrespectful. And we tell parents, you've got it, you can't do it.
Boy.
Right. Now, the third part of respect, though, which is very, very important, is that it also means that you refuse to think really negatively about your kid, right? Like, you're just stingy. You're just selfish. You're just, right? These are judgments that we make about our kids. The Scripture's also pretty clear on this one, right? Judge not lest you be judged, right? When you judge your children, even when you do it in your head and you allow yourself to sort of ruminate on those kind of thoughts about your kid, it's actually going to turn them against you because you can't hide it. It's going to come out. So these are real challenges, and they're very convicting to parents. But we tell them, look, it's scriptural. The Scripture is very clear about not provoking children to wrath because of what it can do.
Oh, it's because you can.
Right. We want to really highlight the respect piece, because if you can't do the respect piece, no matter what other part of this model you have, it won't work. It never does. So EAR. Now, once you actually do that, right? So I hear you. I know you don't want to take it out. My concern is that it's here, right? It's a mess. And also the bigger concern is that as a family, this is what we do. All right. Now we're ready for IC. I is I'm going to invite them, right, into problem solving. So what do we do about it? That's basically what I is. How do we fix it? You notice I'm not giving the solution. I'm asking them to give me the solution.
Sure.
Why? Because now think about this in terms of the brain. There's enough emotion, but it's regulated, because I'm not saying I'm making you do it right this second. I'm saying we don't have to chat about this, right? So there is emotion. I've had him state what his problem is, which is good. He's labeled it. And I've labeled what mine is. So I've got all the parts of the brain in play, and when I say what do we do about it, now I'm getting the highest part of the brain. The cerebral cortex is engaged in him. All right? I'm working his brain. We're weightlifting on the brain now.
Sure.
All right? And we have a context to do it. What do we do? Well, I'll take it out when I come home tonight. Well, all right, that's a possibility, but I've heard that one before. No, I promise I will. Well, that's a possibility, right? But I actually need it taken out this morning. Any other ideas? Now, notice that's the C part of this. That's collaboration, co-labor. We're working together. I'm telling him what I don't like about it, right? Back to the top. I know you want to do that one, but let's see if we can't come up with something else. Well, why don't you take it out? Wait a minute. I could take it out, right? But it's your job, not my job. Are you willing to do one of my jobs for me? Well, Like which one? I got lots of them. You could take the trash out to the end of the driveway for me tonight. No, I don't like that idea. Well, okay. You got any other ideas? I mean, you do have to go outside this morning, don't you? Not so I'm probing his brain and giving him some ideas. Well, yeah, you got to go out to the bus. Well, what if, right? I won't even say it. Oh, I could take it out then. That works for me. Whatever. Are you going to do it? Yeah. All right. Great. In fact, I'll do you a deal. I'll pull it out of the trash can for you. So all you do is carry it out. All right. But that's an example of collaboration. It's also one that I've had numerous times with my own son around those types of issues. Now, I can do plan A with him. Does that make sense? I mean, I can do it. And I often do it. But he doesn't have complex ODD, so I'm not going to get those meltdowns. Right. If you do plan A all the time, even with the best kids, right, you'll probably run into problems.
Sure.
But these types of interactions are the types of interactions that we begin with in helping parents. It helps in two ways. First of all, doing C eliminates meltdowns. Okay. Doing B works on the cognitive skills. But the first thing parents actually have to learn how to do is when to do C. If you have a kid with complex ODD, it would probably have been better to do C by saying, we're going to have to talk about this trash issue later because you didn't take it out. You notice I'm not even doing B in the moment because you know that they're going to lose it.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to lose at that point in time. So there's a difference between different kinds of Bs, right? B in the moment is emergency B. B that's done ahead of time. We're going to talk about this later. Or the night before I talk to them about, how important, tonight you're going to be taking the trash out. So we're looking ahead. Remember, these kids don't do that well, and they don't transition well. So you have to let them know when something's coming up and how you're going to deal with it ahead of time. That's proactive B. And parents learn this art. They get very good at it. And they also tend to find that the meltdowns occur only around a handful of situations, which they can see coming from a mile away. At present, they tend to think they're all the time, every place I look, every time I turn around, and that's part of the negative thinking that goes on for parents because they feel overwhelmed most of the time. This model works very well, very quickly. There's a couple things that we take in mind. Sometimes parents struggle with their own mood dysregulation. They got their own issues going on, and we have to deal with that because if they can't handle their own mood, they're not going to be able to help this child. Nope. It's not a moral weakness. It's just if your moods are out of whack for whatever reason.
And there could be personality, temperament, all kinds of challenges or issues, differences.
That's right. Now, this model is we combine it with the attachment model, right, where we're going to also work on improving the relationship outside of compliance interactions. So we do things, and we've written on this before, and people can look into it, on special time where you take time to interact with your kid in one-to-one situations outside of compliance interactions.
Yes.
Where you're building, if you will, in depositing emotional, capital into your relational account with your child, right? That's what you draw from. And it increases their sense of security and belief that you really do care about them. Usually when it gets to the point of, explosions all over the place, kids really do believe, even when they're not upset, that you don't like them, which is probably not untrue because, they're stressful. And they come home, your gut starts to rumble. So we embed it in that. The collaborative problem-solving skills, if parents want to learn more about them, we've got some other material on them. We're actually developing a treatment manual for this to be used here in the next year. But you can also look for Ross Green and Stuart Ablon's material on explosive children and working with parents and families with explosive children, which highlights this model more, and it's a very nice read.
Gary, a delightful interview. We're out of time, but I want to give you the closing word here for a moment. A strong word to clinicians and then to pastors and parents.
Well, for clinicians, I would say if you've run into children like this and you haven't had as much success, spend some time delving into some of the things I referred to, especially Ross Green's material and then some of the stuff out there on attachment in children, and really sink yourself into that. Get to know kids and their development and where things are going nowadays. a lot deeper and question at one level some of the use. If all you use is behavioral stuff, think about looking at some other things that you might add to your treatment. If you do play therapy, which we really think is a wonderful tool, we also encourage those therapists to think about working some one-on-one with parents on helping them with these kind of interactions that we've talked about. For pastors, we encourage them to be sensitive to parents who are, sort of coming in with these types of problems and realizing that a lot of times these parents need help on a number of different levels, and from a support perspective, sometimes they need, maybe referrals to professional counselors, but they need a lot of love within the church and a lot of support. And you might be surprised that there's just how many parents are struggling with kids with these types of problems in your church. So doing even some educational stuff on it and sort of trying to take the shame away. There's so much shame involved for parents who are struggling with kids with behavioral problems. And it's hard because as parents, we tend to think the quality of me as a person and me as a parent is directly tied to how well my kid's behaving and doing. And so pastors should probably be pretty sensitive to that.
And to parents?
And to parents, I say, look, if your child's struggling with a problem like this, and you've tried a number of different things, you've been reading books, you've been trying new strategies, and everything has been failing, your child is struggling not just at home but at school, with developing friends, with grades, get them evaluated and get some treatment with folks who can actually begin to help you learn some ways of handling this quite a bit different than what you have up to this point. And you may have to challenge some of your old parenting strategies. And I would say that those parenting strategies are probably quite effective for certain kids, but not necessarily for the child that you're struggling with now. I sometimes kid around and say, not all parents who are bad parents actually have bad kids. All right. If you ever seen that before, there's a lot of us, or a lot of adults out there who are very successful and love the Lord who didn't really have that great of parents. All right. And not all good parents have good kids. You can be a very skilled parent who have very motivated and very into your children, but your child still struggles. That parenting requires different skill sets.
Extra effort kids. Special needs kids requires special parenting skill sets. And I often tell some of my parents that, you got a graduate degree now, basically, in parenting skills, because you've had to develop a range of skills that the average parent out there has never even thought of. And they get very good at it. Some of these parents are really amazing at how well they can regulate their kids and how far their kids have actually come along. So, Gary, thanks for taking time out of your day. We're glad to have you here as a part of the Counsel CD program. And to all of you AACC members out there, let me say a word of affirmation to you. At AACC, we do love being a part of your life. Let me encourage you, if there's only one conference that you can go to this year, get to the 2007 No Greater Love World Conference. Individuals like Gary, workshops, over 140 different selections, the best in pre-conference workshops, and a plenary speaker lineup that I think is our best ever. You're going to get that and more at this year's World Conference. We'd love to see you there, and as always, we love being a part of your life. God bless you.
Counsel CD, an exclusive presentation for members of the American Association of Christian Counselors. For more information on the AACC World Conference, upcoming crisis intervention and stress management courses, and the many counseling resources available to you, call 1-800-526-8673, 800-526-8673, or log on to aacc.net. You make it happen. Thanks for being a valued part of the American Association of Christian Counselors.